Alright, let's kick things off in the 1920s, a time of flapper dresses, jazz music, and apparently glowing in the dark. Not in the cool, rave way though. See, back then, radium was the hot new thing, literally, it glowed. Naturally, someone decided to capitalize on this because capitalism and boom, the radium industry was born. Enter the Radium Girls, a group of factory workers who painted watch faces with radium-laced paint. They were told it was totally safe, even encouraged to lick the brushes to get a fine point. Now, if this was a cartoon, this is where the alarm bells would be going off, right? But tragically, this wasn't a cartoon. It was real life. And these women were slowly poisoning themselves with every brushstroke. Their bones literally started to disintegrate. They got tumors, their jaws crumbled, and well, it wasn't pretty. The worst part? The companies knew about the dangers of radium all along, they just didn't care. Profit over people, am I right? The Radium Girls story is a tragic reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things can also be the deadliest. Okay folks, buckle up for this one because it's a wild ride. We're going all the way back to the 18th century. A time when medicine was less evidence-based and more let's just try this and see what happens. This is the story of Mary Toft, a woman who managed to convince doctors that she was giving birth to, wait for it, rabbits. Yes, you heard me right, rabbits. Now I know what you're thinking. Shane, this is ridiculous. How could anyone believe that? And you'd be right to be skeptical. But somehow Mary Toft had these doctors fooled. She claimed she went into labor after being startled by rabbits, and next thing you know she's delivering rabbit parts. Was she some kind of sorceress? A master of illusion? Or were the doctors just really bad at their jobs? We'll probably never know for sure. But one thing's for certain. Mary Toft's story is a bizarre and unsettling reminder that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. Alright, buckle up Buttercup, because this one is a real heartbreaker. We're talking about babies, those little bundles of joy that scream for no reason and poop their pants. Sounds fun, right? Well, imagine being a baby before the 1980s. You're just chilling, probably gnawing on your own foot because you don't know any better, and boom, you need surgery. And guess what? No pain relief for you. Yep, you heard that right. Doctors used to think babies couldn't feel pain. Can you imagine that? Like, look at a baby's face and tell me they can't feel a stubbed toe. It just doesn't make sense. So these poor little guys would be strapped down, screaming their tiny lungs out, while doctors poked and prodded. It's enough to make you want to invent a time machine just to go back and give those doctors a stern talking to. Okay, history buffs, you know this guy, Genghis Khan, conqueror, warlord, all-around intimidating dude with a killer PR team. Seriously, the guy's been dead for centuries and we're still talking about him. But here's the thing about conquering half the known world, it's messy. And by messy, I mean a whole lot of people end up, not being alive anymore. We're talking millions, like an uncomfortable amount of millions. Now I'm no scientist, but I'm pretty sure humans breathe out this thing called carbon dioxide, right? Turns out, when you eliminate a significant chunk of the global population, all that CO2 they would have been exhaling kind of just disappears. Scientists have actually found evidence that Genghis Khan's conquest had a measurable impact on the Earth's atmosphere. They call it the Genghis Khan cooling effect. Ironic, right? The guy was a walking inferno of destruction, but he ended up slightly cooling the planet. Go figure. Alright, let's take a trip across the pond to good old Victorian England. Land of tea, crumpets, and apparently some seriously questionable parenting choices. I'm talking about baby cages, folks. Yes, you heard me right. Back in the 1930s, if you were strolling down a London street, you might just see a bunch of babies hanging out of windows, in cages. Now, before you call Child Protective Services on the entire Victorian era, they weren't trying to traumatize their kids, at least I hope not. The idea was that these cages would give babies some fresh air and sunshine, even if they lived in cramped apartments. Still, You've got to wonder about the thought process here. How can we give little Timmy some fresh air? I know. Let's suspend him 5 stories above a busy street in a metal cage. It's enough to make you want to crawl into a cage yourself and hide. Alright, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to dive into a historical mystery that's just begging for a logical explanation. It's 1518 Strasbourg, France. The vibes are immaculate, the baguettes are fresh, and the people are dancing. I mean, really dancing. Like, they can't stop, won't stop dancing, and it's about to get weird. This wasn't your average waltz or two-step, though. This was full-blown, non-stop frenzy in the streets. We're talking days, weeks even, of people just flailing, jerking, and jiving until they collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, or, death. Because, yeah, this wasn't just some medieval flash mob. People were straight up dying from this bizarre dance craze. The dancing plague eventually faded away, leaving behind a whole lot of unanswered questions and, probably, some really sore feet. What if I told you that sometimes death isn't the showstopper we all thought it was, specifically when it comes to childbirth? We're talking about post-mortem births, also known as coffin births. Post-mortem births are incredibly rare and usually occur within a few hours of the mother's death. It's a grim combination of gas buildup and muscle relaxation that can expel the fetus. One well-documented case comes from 17th century France. Grave robbers found a newborn baby lying next to its deceased mother. It's the kind of story that makes you want to sleep with the lights on. Alright, let's talk about something that probably keeps you up at night, being buried alive. It's every claustrophobic person's worst nightmare. Being stuck in a box 6 feet under with a dwindling oxygen supply? No thanks. It used to happen way more often than you'd think. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, medical science wasn't what it is today. Doctors weren't known for their meticulous diagnostic skills. People took extreme precautions, like coffins with bells and speaking tubes. Talk about a wake-up call, am I right? Buckle up, folks. This one's straight out of a horror movie, but with real-life terror. A single tiger racked up a kill count of 436 people. This wasn't your average house cat. This was the Champawat Tiger, on a rampage. It stalked Nepal and Kwame in the late 1800s, leaving a trail of bodies like a furry grim reaper. People were terrified to leave their homes. The Nepalese army was called in, but it was like fighting a ghost. Let's be real, babysitters can be creepy. I mean, have you seen The Exorcist? But this story takes creepy caretaker to a whole new level of messed up. We're talking about a woman named Mary Cotton, and let's just say, she wasn't winning any Babysitter of the Year awards back in the 19th century. In fact, she was busy earning herself a one-way ticket to the gallows. See, Mary Ann had a bad habit of outliving the children she was supposed to be caring for, and by outliving, I mean they were dying. A lot of them, like suspiciously a lot of them. Turns out, this sinister Mary Poppins had a penchant for arsenic. The authorities finally caught on to her little scheme, and let me tell you, they were not impressed. This wasn't just some rogue babysitter having a bad day. Mary Ann Cotton was a full-on serial killer, bumping off anyone who got in her way, including husbands, lovers, and even her own mother. Yeah, you heard that right. Okay, so you know how some people are really into weird collections like stamps, coins, those little bottles of shampoo from hotels? Well, in the 1800s, people were apparently really into teeth. And not just any teeth, mind you. We're talking about dead people's teeth. Yeah, you heard me right. Back then, dentures weren't exactly what you'd call, sophisticated. So, dentists and tooth providers had to get creative. And where better to find a fresh supply of chompers than on the battlefields? After major conflicts like the Battle of Waterloo, scavengers would descend upon the carnage, not just for valuables, but for teeth. These tooth hunters would pry open the mouths of fallen soldiers, yank out any pearly whites they could salvage, and sell them to dentists. It was a grim business, but hey, supply and demand, right? Imagine going to the dentist today and finding out your new chompers once belonged to some poor soldier who died in a muddy field 200 years ago. Alright, picture this. 1922. You're a farmer in rural Germany just minding your own business, maybe chasing off a raccoon or two. Life's simple, right? Not for this family. They were found dead on their farm, and to this day, nobody knows who did it or why. We're talking a whole family wiped out, and not just a quick drop of the axe kind of deal. The scene was gruesome, with signs of a struggle and some seriously creepy details that'll make you want to sleep with the lights on. Theories ran wild, of course. Was it a robbery gone wrong? Revenge from a rival farmer? Or maybe something even darker lurking in the shadows? The police investigated every lead, every whisper, and every rumor, but the killer vanished like a ghost in the night. To this day, the murder on the farm remains unsolved, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are the ones we can never explain. Okay, so you think those awkward family photos from your childhood are bad? Try posing for a picture with your dead relatives. Yeah, you heard me right. In Victorian England, post-mortem photography was all the rage. Talk about a morbid way to remember your loved ones. People would dress up their deceased family members in their Sunday best and pose them for portraits, sometimes even propping their eyes open to make them look more lifelike. I mean, I get wanting to hold on to memories, but this is a whole new level of creepy. Imagine walking into your grandma's house and seeing a framed photo of your great-great-aunt Agnes propped up on a chair, eyes glazed over, looking like she's about to offer you some lukewarm tea and stale biscuits. Honestly, the whole thing just screams haunted Victorian dollhouse. It's enough to give you nightmares for weeks. I guess you could say they really knew how to keep it spooky in the Victorian era. Alright, let's talk about Dennis Rader, better known as the BTK killer. This guy is straight out of your nightmares. From the 1970s to the 1990s, he terrorized Wichita, Kansas, leaving a trail of bodies and fear in his wake. But what makes him even creepier is his MO. He would literally wait for his victims in their own homes. Imagine this. You're home alone, feeling safe and sound in your own space, when in reality, there's a monster hiding in your closet, under your bed, or maybe even just chilling in your basement, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Rader got off on the power he held over his victims, the way he could control their fear. He'd send taunting letters to the police, detailing his crimes, signing them BTK bind, torture, kill. Talk about a calling card from hell. The worst part? He lived a seemingly normal life while carrying out these horrific acts. He had a family, went to church, even served as a dog catcher. It just goes to show that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden in plain sight. Okay, so we've all heard whispers about ancient civilizations using weird stuff in their medicine, right? Like ground up beetle wings or whatever. Turns out for a solid chunk of history, human remains were considered A-OK to toss into the old medical cabinet. I'm talking skulls, powdered hearts, even straight up mummy bits. And the craziest part? This wasn't some fringe thing, it was surprisingly common practice. What are we doing now that future generations are going to look back on and be like, those absolute clowns? Alright, buckle up because this one's a real doozy. So, we all know the story of the Titanic, right? Big, unsinkable ship, hits an iceberg, chaos ensues, a tragedy of epic proportions. But what if I told you that a novel was published 14 years before the Titanic sank that basically predicted the whole thing? Yeah, you heard that right. In 1898, a dude named Morgan Robertson wrote a book called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. And get this, it's about a massive, supposedly unsinkable ocean liner called the Titan that collides with an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks. Coincidence? Maybe. But the similarities don't stop there. Both ships were described as the largest of their time, both had a limited number of lifeboats, and both sank in April. It's almost like Robertson had a crystal ball or something. Or maybe he was just really good at predicting terrible maritime disasters. Either way, it's a chilling reminder that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and also a reminder to maybe not tempt fate by building giant, unsinkable ships. Just a thought. Alright, let's talk about medieval justice, or at least what passed for justice back then. We're talking about a time when they didn't have fancy prisons or, basic human rights. So what did they do with criminals? Well, if you were lucky, you got a slap on the wrist. And by slap on the wrist, I mean you were probably beheaded or burned at the stake. But if you were really unlucky, you got the hanging treatment. And not the quick and painless kind. I'm talking about being strung up on a gallows and left there to rot for days, weeks, even months. Yeah, it was a real picnic back then. The idea was to make an example of the criminal, a gruesome warning to anyone else thinking about stepping out of line, but honestly, it's just straight up creepy. Imagine walking through town and seeing a bunch of decomposing bodies just swaying in the breeze. Talk about killing the mood. It's enough to make you want to stay on the straight and narrow, even if it means missing out on all the fun medieval crimes. Okay, so you know Dracula? The OG vampire with a taste for blood and a thing for capes? Well, buckle up because this isn't about some fictional bloodsucker. Dracula was inspired by a real dude, Vlad the Third, also known as Vlad the Impaler. And trust me, that nickname wasn't earned from handing out free corn dogs at a carnival. Vlad was born in Transylvania, Romania. We're talking 15th century, the Wild West of Eastern Europe. Vlad wasn't known for his sunny disposition. This guy was hardcore, even by medieval standards. Vlad had a thing for impaling his enemies. We're talking slow, excruciating deaths. Thousands of people, allegedly. Legend has it, he once had a whole forest of people impaled. The stories about Vlad are so brutal, they're almost unbelievable. But hey, that's history for you, right? So, did Bram Stoker base Dracula directly on Vlad? There's no smoking gun, but the similarities are hard to ignore. The name, the location, the whole bloodlust thing. It makes you wonder, right? Was Vlad just a brutal ruler, or was there something more supernatural going on? I'll let you decide. But maybe sleep with the lights on tonight, just in case. Alright folks, buckle up for this one because it's a real head-scratcher. Picture this. 1929, you're a shopkeeper just trying to make your way in the world. You're in your shop, minding your own business when, BAM! You're murdered. The police arrive and the shop is locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows. How did the killer get in and out without a trace? Maybe there was something more sinister at play. To this day, the Isidor Fink case remains unsolved, leaving a big question mark in the history books. Alright, let's talk ossuaries. Imagine walking into a church, but instead of stained glass and pews, you're greeted by thousands of human bones. Not just scattered around, but arranged in elaborate patterns and designs. Skulls stacked high, femurs forming arches. Welcome to the ossuaries of Europe. These bone-filled structures were all the rage back in the medieval period. Seems a little morbid for a place of worship, right? It all comes down to space, or lack thereof. With cemeteries overflowing, they needed somewhere to put all those dearly departed. These weren't just storage facilities, they were sacred spaces. And let's be real, they're pretty darn fascinating. Well, there you have it, folks. 20 incredibly true, incredibly creepy historical facts that probably made you question everything you thought you knew about the past. And maybe made you a little bit afraid of the dark. But hey, at least you're not alone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more creepy historical facts. Tell us which dark history facts gives you chills, and I will make a video about.